Hello everyone! Today we'll talk about a horrifying massacre that took place in the early 21st century in Shenzhen, Guangdong Province, China. The central figure in this case is Mr. Chu Yinan, the former vice president of a well-known media organization in Hong Kong. At the height of his career, he was considered one of the wealthiest and most successful men, known for his cautious and discreet nature. However, despite meticulously planning every aspect of his life, he never anticipated the catastrophe he would unleash upon himself when he unknowingly connected two social classes that should never have crossed paths. On May 29, 2004, one of EA, Chu Yinan's employees sensed something was wrong after failing to reach his boss for 3 consecutive days. His mobile phone was turned off and the landline at his home was out of service. Worried that something terrible had happened, the employee decided to visit his boss's residence in Futian district, Shenzhen, to check on him. Chu's home was a villa in a quiet residential area called Trust Garden. But as soon as the employee arrived, he was forced to stop in his tracks. A strong, foul odor emanated from inside the house. He knocked repeatedly, but there was no response. Strangely, Chu's car was still parked in the driveway, covered in dust, indicating it hadn't been used for days. Feeling uneasy, the employee sought permission from the security guard, then climbed through a window to investigate. The moment he stepped inside, he was met with a horrifying, blood-soaked scene. Shocked and terrified, he immediately called the police. Shenzhen police quickly arrived at the scene. The initial investigation revealed that the entire Chu family had been brutally murdered inside their home. Investigators discovered the bodies of 5 people: Chu Yinan, his mistress Zhang Yongjing, a 4-year-old girl, accountant Dang Zhenjiang, and a 16-year-old maid named Lin Jin. Among them, Chu had suffered the most brutal attack, with multiple stab wounds to the neck. Dang had died from severe head trauma, while the others had been suffocated to death. Further examination of the crime scene revealed that all cash, credit cards, and several valuable possessions had been stolen from Chu's home. Chu Yinan had lived in Trust Garden, one of the most luxurious residential areas at the time. In 1998, he purchased his 150-square-meter villa for 1.2 million yuan. Back then, mortgage loans were uncommon, and most wealthy buyers paid for their homes in full. Despite his immense wealth, Chu led a relatively simple and low-profile life. He dressed modestly, never flaunted his riches, and even opted for budget-friendly barbershops instead of high-end salons. He had no known disputes or conflicts with his neighbors. However, details from the crime scene led investigators to question whether this was truly a robbery homicide or a revenge killing. After all, even a 4-year-old child was not spared, suggesting that this was more of a targeted massacre than a mere crime for money. So who could have held such deep hatred toward Chu Yinan to slaughter his entire family? To answer this, we must first understand the life of the man himself. Chu Yinan had a unique fate. He was known for his adaptable nature. In 1983, he graduated from the Beijing University of Posts and Telecommunications and was assigned to the Advertising Production Department of China Central Television. As advertising revenues surged over the years, Chu, known for his diligence and reliability, rose to the position of chairman and even secured a 10% stake in the company. Upon digging deeper, police found that Chu's wealth was not overly complicated. Although his business ventures had not always been smooth, there were no indications that he had made any enemies serious enough to warrant such a brutal attack. In contrast, his personal and marital life seemed to contain far more secrets. After moving to Hong Kong in 1990, his relationship with his wife, Zhao, began to deteriorate. In their 8 years of marriage, they never had children together. By the end of 1998, when Chu returned to Shenzhen, he was no longer seen with his wife. It was assumed that they had separated, as he was now living with a much younger woman. Fai, woman murdered alongside Chu, Zhang Yongjing, was initially believed to be his second wife. However, upon investigation, the police discovered that Chu had never officially divorced his first wife. Thus, Xiang was merely his mistress. To the neighbors, Xiang was a cheerful and beautiful woman who spoke with a Sichuan accent. She was 21 years younger than Chu, with an older brother and 2 older sisters. When she was 3, a violent argument broke out between her parents. The next day, her mother mysteriously died at home. Her father, Xiang Wenbin, was suspected of murdering his wife and was arrested. As a result, the Xiang siblings became orphans overnight, left in the care of their frail grandparents with little support from extended family. 3 years later, due to a lack of conclusive evidence, Xiang Wenbin was released. But his absence had already plunged the family into extreme hardship. All 4 children had to drop out of school after primary education. To survive, Zheng Yongjing took on various jobs. She endured countless hardships but earned very little. By the time she was 16 or 17, she decided to leave her hometown in search of a better life. The once poor girl had grown into a striking, young woman, her fair skin and slender figure catching the attention of many men on the streets. In the following years, she drifted through major cities like Beijing and Shenzhen. However, no one knew exactly what she had experienced during this time. In 1997, she returned to her hometown as an entirely different person. Dressed in fashionable clothes and adorned with dazzling jewelry, she stunned the neighbors. The ring on her finger alone was worth more than 9,000 yuan, a fortune for the rural community she came from. By the end of 1998, through introductions from friends and family, she met Yang Wen, a bus driver in Hongya County, Sichuan. Yang was a divorced man with a child from his previous marriage. Despite warnings from those around her, she married him in April 1999, but their marriage was far from happy. The couple frequently argued. In 2001, she gave birth to a daughter, Yang Shiyue. However, when the baby was only 6 months old, Xiang abruptly left her hometown, claiming she was going to Shenzhen to learn beauty techniques. She then disappeared for over 6 months without returning home once. When she returned home for a rare Lunar New Year visit, she only stayed for a little, over 10 days before leaving again. This behavior started making her husband, Yang Wen, suspicious. Feeling uneasy, he decided to follow the address where he had been sending baby formula for their daughter. There, to his shock, he discovered the presence of a man named Chu Yinan. Realizing his wife had been having an affair. On February 20th, 2002, Yang Wen made the decision to file for divorce. In reality, Xiang Yongjing had met Chu Yinan years earlier when she first moved to Beijing for work. However, at the time, Chu was still married and often away in Hong Kong for business. Not feeling secure in that situation, Yongjing ultimately returned home and married another man. But after she gave birth to her daughter, Chu Yinan unexpectedly reached out to her, reigniting their past feelings. Since her marriage with Yang Wen was already unhappy, she quickly gave in. Not long after, she made the decision to take her daughter to Shenzhen to live with Chu Yinan. From then on, she rarely returned home. Life in Shenzhen was easy for her. Every day, she would visit the Viet-Lai tea house in her apartment complex, where she played cards and relaxed. There, she met many women in similar situations, including Wu Yuan Shui. In 1997, when Hong Kong was handed back to China, it triggered a surge in wealthy Hong Kong men keeping mistresses on the mainland. Women like Xiang Yongjing could earn anywhere from H$3,000 to H$10,000 a month without doing any hard labor. Wu Yuan Shui came from a poor rural family in Hubei Province. Since childhood, she had been ambitious, determined to escape poverty. After finishing middle school, she moved to Guangdong to work, dreaming of a better life. However, she soon realized that without education or skills, ambition alone wouldn't change her fate. Eventually, she turned to special services. She didn't just rely on Hong Kong men for money, she also acted as a broker, managing and controlling a group of women in the same trade. For Wu Yuan Shui, daily life revolved around pleasing her Hong Kong lover and indulging in entertainment. One of her greatest pleasures was playing cards at the Viet-Lai tea house. Before long, she became close with Xiang Yongjing, a regular at the tea house. Yongjing was outgoing and never distanced herself from others. Even if she lost thousands at the gambling table, she remained unfazed. She also loved bragging about her husband, Chu. Sometimes she would boast about the gourmet food he had bought, other times about his latest investment projects. Meanwhile, Wu Yuan Shui, despite years of hustling, hadn't even managed to buy herself a home. Both women came from poor backgrounds and struggled their way up from misfortune, yet their lives turned out completely different. Xiang Yongjing was lucky. Her beauty made it easy for her to find a wealthy man to rely on. Her life was filled with luxury, 2 expensive cars, a lavish home, and a maid to care for her child. In contrast, Wu Yuanshui wasn't particularly attractive, and time was only making things worse for her. She often told her friends that finding a rich man was the only way to secure a comfortable future. Yet, her current reality was grim. On one hand, she had a beautiful friend living in luxury. On the other, her Hong Kong lover was growing increasingly distant. In fact, in the months leading up to the incident, her lover had stopped giving her money altogether, claiming she was getting old and no longer attractive. This infuriated her. In April 2004, she sought out Luo Jun, a former colleague of her brother-in-law, to discuss a secret plan. Luo Jun was a fugitive, wanted for embezzlement. Wu Yuanshui told him she wanted to find some thugs to teach her Hong Kong lover a lesson and in the process, extract a large sum of money before disappearing. Luo Jun immediately agreed, but there was a problem. The Hong Kong man had already been warned about Wu Yuanshui. Many of his friends had told him she was greedy and capable of anything for money, possibly even plotting something sinister. Although he didn't fully believe the warnings, he remained cautious, making it impossible for Luo Jun and his men to strike. After waiting for days without an opportunity, Luo Jun grew impatient. He told Wu Yuanshui, "Instead of waiting, why not find someone else with money to rob?" Instantly, Wu Yuanshui thought of Xiang Yongjing. What made it worse was that the target of the scheme remained completely unaware. She continued treating Wu Yuanshui as a close friend, often inviting her over to play cards without the slightest suspicion. And so, in early May 2004, during a card game at Xiang Yongjing's home, Wu Yuanshui quietly began devising a sinister plan. That day, as the game was heating up, one of their card-playing friends had to leave unexpectedly. Wu Yuanshui saw her chance. "Why don't I call someone to take her place?" she suggested. Without hesitation, she picked up the phone and called Luo Jun. About 30 minutes later, Luo Jun arrived at Chu Yinan's home. It was the first time all Wu, 3 of them, Xiang Yongjing, Wu Yuanshui, and Luo Jun, were together in the same place. From that day on, Wu Yuanshui became the inside informant, secretly observing and memorizing the family's routines, while Luo Jun continued using card games as an excuse to scope out their home. During this time, they even met Chu Yinan. However, Luo Jun couldn't determine just how wealthy the family was, and he hesitated. After 2 more weeks of observation, he temporarily returned to his hometown in Guangdong, Hunan Province. But just days later, Wu Yuanshui called, urging him to come back. She claimed the perfect time to strike had come and told him to return to Shenzhen immediately. At the time, Luo Jun was in his hometown with a friend, Zhang Dao, planning to steal a car. Hearing the news, he abandoned that plan, grabbed a few pre-sharpened knives, and convinced Zhang Dao to join him. He then contacted 2 other accomplices online, Zheng An and Hu Gang. The 4 of them, armed with weapons, set off for Shenzhen. They agreed to act on May 26th. That day, Xiang Yongjing took her daughter to the hospital while Chu Yinan went to work. The only person left at home was their 16-year-old maid. It was the perfect opportunity. Wu Yuanshui gave Luo Jun the family's phone number, instructing him to call the maid and pretend to be a friend of Xiang Yongjing delivering a package. Just as expected, the young maid didn't suspect anything. When she got the call, she opened the door without hesitation and even offered the men tea. But the moment she turned her back, Zhang Dao swiftly pulled out a knife and held it to her throat. Terrified, the maid didn't even have time to scream, before Zhang Dao and Luo Jun tied her up and gagged her. With the only person in the house now subdued, Luo Jun immediately called Zheng An and Hu Gang inside, while he stood outside to keep watch. Inside, the 3 criminals made themselves comfortable. They turned on the TV and lounged on the sofa for over 2 hours, waiting for the homeowners to return. At 4 p.m., Xiang Yongjing and her daughter were the first to arrive. The moment she stepped inside, she was ambushed. Then, at around 6 p.m., Chu Yinan came home. He was quickly tied up, and before he could say a word, they gagged him. Both victims were completely under the gang's control, unable to resist. By 7 p.m., Hu Gong and Zheng An had searched the entire house, taking multiple bank cards, mobile phones, 3,800 yuan, and 620 Hong Kong dollars. At 9 p.m., Zhang Dao called La Jun over and handed him the bank books and cards they had found. La Jun left immediately, heading to a nearby ATM, where he withdrew 5,000 yuan from Xiang Yongjing's account. By 11 p.m., the company accountant of Chu Yinan also returned home. The criminals subdued him using the same methods. At that point, everyone in the household had been captured. Zhang Dao called La Jun again, telling him to return and retrieve 2 more bank cards found in the master bedroom. When La Jun checked one of them, he was shocked. It held over 6 million yuan. He immediately informed Zhang Dao. But then Zhang Dao delivered bad news. The old accountant was dead. At that moment, they suddenly realized that the 16-year-old maid had seen La Jun's face. They debated what to do. In the end, Zhang Dao decided to kill all the witnesses. He reasoned that since one person had already died, there was no turning back. La Jun remained silent but did not object. From that moment on, things spiraled out of control. Inside the house, Zhang Dao, Zheng An, and Hu Gong divided the killings among themselves. Zhang Dao and Zheng An were in charge of dealing with Chu Yinan and the maid. Hu Gong handled Xiang Yongjing. After the murders, only 4-year-old Yang Zhihui was left. Earlier, they had discussed what to do with her if they had to eliminate all witnesses. Both La Jun and Wu Yanshui had daughters of their own, so they opposed killing a child. But Zhang Dao coldly stated, "We've come this far. Even if I don't want to do it if no one else will, then I'll do it myself." It took several days before the horrific crime was discovered. During that time, the 5 perpetrators brazenly used the stolen bank cards to shop at major malls in Shenzhen. They squandered over 630,000 yuan on gold, phones, and video cameras. Afterward, they split up and fled. Wu Yanshui escaped to Dongguan. However, the police quickly identified Wu Yanshui as a key suspect. She was the first to be arrested. Once, in custody, she broke down completely and confessed everything, exposing her accomplices. Within 30 hours, the remaining 4 were captured one by one. On September 13, 2004, the Shenzhen Intermediate People's Court held a public trial for the 5 main defendants and 2 others charged with harboring criminals and handling stolen goods. All 5 principal offenders were sentenced to death. By the end of November 2004, they were executed. Witnesses at the execution reported that they remained calm, making no scenes. The case was truly horrifying. As time passed, it faded from public memory, but the harsh lessons of greed, dishonesty, and the price of poor choices remained.